Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is making the case for sucking it up and voting for Joe Biden. Let's watch.
Had it or hit it, Joe Biden.
Hit it. You know, honestly, here's the thing. I think sometimes people want electoral politics to be, we overly identify with, it's like if you vote for someone, they have to be the embodiment of you. And that's actually something that I think Donald Trump provided to a lot of people, where it's like, if you voted for him and if you were a Donald Trump person, like you want, like it symbolized so much. But I think what we have here in this situation is a more just honest thing. There are plenty of things that the president does that I completely disagree with. I think, you know, right now what's happening in Gaza, I can't go on every single day seeing this. I don't associate myself with what's happening. But at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that we just can't allow this fascist movement to grow in this country.
CBS recently interviewed voters not so keen on Joe, given his support of Israel's war on Gaza. One said that was a deal breaker.
He's not listening to us. We are asking for a ceasefire at this time. It's a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Too many lives are being lost at this time. I was never a single issue voter. In fact, I used to argue with people not to be single issue voters. But for me, this is a deal breaker. Way too many lives have been lost.
A community is in mourning after a Palestinian-American teenager raised in Louisiana was killed after he was allegedly shot by a settler in the West Bank, reports NBC News. The 17-year-old boy was visiting the region to learn more about his roots. Meanwhile, Columbia University released an update on the investigation into an apparent skunk gas attack made on Palestinian peaceful protesters. They say the NYPD is, quote, taking the lead role in investigating what appear to have been serious crimes, possibly hate crimes. Now, that investigation seems to have followed only The Intercept reporting. No other mainstream news outlet seemed to have covered it. And when The Intercept reached out to Columbia University to ask what they were doing about this attack, the response that they got, in which they cited in the article, was the initial pro-Palestine protest was unsanctioned. Therefore, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but we wash our hands of it. I mean, it was unsanctioned, and so we're not doing anything about it.
The campus newspaper did a report.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I said mainstream,
yeah. No.
So,
well, that's crazy. I mean, the police have to investigate, must investigate such a thing.
The story has really escalated into this media story, which is why, but for The Intercept doing that coverage, would Columbia have had any real response, or would they have taken the position that these pro-Palestine students didn't deserve any protection from the university because they were participating in an unauthorized protest? And then what does that mean if universities can simply wash their hands of what's going on their campus by designating various groups or activities as unauthorized, regardless of whether that's meritorious?
So the university,
what does that mean?
Has banned the alleged suspects from the campus so far, pending an investigation. So they are investigating it. I mean, the police should investigate it. It's the Columbia, sometimes there's a difference between, Columbia's New York, so that has their own police department. Some law enforcement officer has to take action here to look into this.
Now they're on the case, but the question is, is this really demonstrating the power of journalism to create actual change and incentivize change? But there's a lot to unpack here. Let's go back to the AOC news up top, because that was such a viral clip, I think, for obvious reasons. To me, it felt like an effort to intellectualize the reality that so many Democrats or people who are just on the broad kind of left or broadly populist feel so disconnected with Joe Biden. And this effort to say, well, it's weird and Trumpy to feel represented by your presidential candidate felt like such a coping mechanism for what the position she's in, because she said specifically, I don't associate myself with what's happening in Gaza. I don't associate myself. But ma'am, you are an elected representative in Congress whose job it is to advance the interests of your constituents. And so for you to sit here and say that you are going to endorse, which she did, immediately endorse Joe Biden as soon as he announced, if you're going to endorse and ask people to vote for the leader of your party, you are associated with that. And if you don't want to, then maybe it's time for you to act on what you said you were going to do when you were first elected into Congress, which is to say, I'm going to have an adversarial politics. And in any normal country, Joe Biden and I wouldn't be in the same party.
Yeah, I think she's totally given up on having an adversarial political relationship with the mainstream of the party. I found her comments there interesting because I actually agree with some of what she was saying there, in that it is not a healthy phenomenon to identify necessarily with a political leader in a personality way. Like, this is not your family member, this is not your friend. It's the same way we tend to like personalized celebrity. Oh, that must be a nice person.
Sure.
It has a like, you should choose someone whose policies agree with you. You agree with their policies and like that person. But we tend to have, like, Donald Trump obviously has some charismatic hold that even if he's not substantially delivering, people like what he says and what the attitude is and just want more of that. That can be unhealthy. But what I found interesting was, so I actually agree with that sentiment. But as soon as she, and we didn't play the rest, it was like a 5-minute clip. Immediately after she says that remark, and the hosts, who I don't know who they are, but I don't know what the show is. But
it's a fun podcast. I mean, it's not a political podcast.
So one of the hosts immediately after says, yeah, Trump is like your alcoholic stepfather and Joe Biden is your grandfather who you just want to like bring in and have a hug with. Like, no, that's exactly what AOC was just saying is not healthy. It's not your father. Right. It's not your grandfather. It's not a member of your family. It is a political figure who will disappoint you, who will take positions that you think are bad and don't hold. It's who has the most opinions you like with, or policy more than opinions, is actually making the change you want. And if no one, then don't vote for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I disagree with you. I just think it's a straw man. The idea that people don't like Biden because they don't have that they're looking for a parasocial relationship. No, people don't like Biden because they see him as responsible for the genocide of 25,000 Palestinians that's happened over the course of 3 months. That's why they don't like Biden. And for you to sit there as a self-described socialist and not have a mumbling word about that, to watch your friend and coworker Rashida Tlaib be dogpiled and censured by our government, her speech rights stripped away, and being condemned by our Congress for advocating for Palestinian rights. And I'm not saying that AOC hasn't offered support and called for a ceasefire and refrained from some of those votes or voted against some of those measures. But it seems like a half measure. And in this moment, what is the difference? What does it mean for you to say, well, I don't agree with what they're doing to Rashida Tlaib, or I don't agree that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism? If at the end of the day, you're going to tell your constituents, you're going to stand up and say you should vote for the guy who is ringleading all of that at a time when there are a larger volume of independent candidates than there have been in recent history, where there's a Democratic primary that is being rigged by Joe Biden, and you're ignoring that fact, and you haven't said a mumbling word about the fact that someone like Marianne Williamson, who entirely shares your politics and your policy platform, someone like Cornel West, who entirely shares your politics and your policy platform, or Jill Stein, are all in the race, and you won't even give them a nod. You wouldn't even say, well, I'm going to refrain from an endorsement because I think the Democratic primary process needs to play out. You are complicit, and no amount of words said on a fun podcast are going to make it so that you're actually dissociated from what's going on.
That does it for us for today. Tomorrow on Rising, we'll discuss the results from the New Hampshire primary and anything else that takes place in the next 24-hour period.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who prefer to listen while you're on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
See you tomorrow.
Take care.